Okay, so we're going to move on to doing the same things we basically did last video, where we're going to actually sculpt the head to a relatively medium resolution state, similar to what we did with the Jonathan Banks, but this time we're going to use a different reference, and we're going to approach things differently at first. So what I've done is I've gone into our resource library and I found Sekaa. I really like her group of images because we have this really nice group of effectively wide poses where we're actually getting all the way around the head. So I'm actually able to have a full kind of move around of her, which is great. So what I'm going to do at first is just go around and show you what I'm thinking about when I'm sculpting. It's not necessarily something I'm going to do every time unless I'm really stuck on something. I'll not necessarily go in and draw over a portrait of someone just to get to know everything. But this is what's going on in my head. This is one thing I'll be thinking about constantly, and especially in the early stages that's where the form really kind of is really important to kind of understand. Is at the beginning we need to get all the forms in, width of head, height of head, depth of head, positions of eyelids, the eye sockets, positions, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go around and do a little bit of that for a few minutes, and also just explain that we don't always have perfect reference. Now these are really, really good references, but they're not perfect because in some of them, like the front view here, she's not looking directly at us. She's looking upwards, so I have to take that into account. Both the 3/4 views are different, so this one's kind of slightly up, where this one's kind of fairly straight on. The profiles are pretty good. Well, I think her right one, she's looking slightly more to the left than I'd like. And then I've got the back kind of profile 3/4 so that I'm understanding what's going on with her cheeks and a jawline from the back, because she's got a really nice shadow here showing some good information. Cool. So what I'm actually thinking about at first. So one thing I'm going to be looking at is, again, I'm going to be observing information like, how tilted is the head. Can I get a good idea about the focal length of the camera? Now this is a portrait camera, so the focal length is going to be quite high, which means, just like we did in the last video, I've got an 85mm focal length on mine, so it makes everything a little bit more shallow. If you have a really low focal length, it means everything's really extended and pulled, and you don't necessarily get the right relation to everything. So I'm just looking, height of the head, kind of, okay, so let's get the front plane of the head kind of tripped out there. So I'm looking for those, sticky keys. I'm looking for those zygomatic arches, the temporal ridge areas like we're talking about. Effectively everything inside of here is the face plate for me. Okay, so I'm looking at that, looking at the width of the nose. Okay, can I see any planars from the front? Now, because I got this really nice light coming in from the side here, I am seeing a little bit of a flat plane there. So a flat plane on the cheek, and then a flat plane on the temporal ridge, and that stands to reason that she's going to have the same on the opposite side. Of course, we've got the nose plane there, but the other views are going to help me with that more. Looking at the neck, I always try and make the neck as straight as possible for a long time, unless there is a really kind of complex shape there. Now you can see here she does kind of curve up towards a neck, more like this. But I'm just looking at the general width of a neck, and it's pretty much in line there. So she's not got a very, very, very thin neck. She's got a little bit of a wide neck. It looks thinner from the side, I found on Sekaa. Cool. And, an idea about the chin position. But again, I'm thinking that I'm not going to get absolute perfect ideas here because she's looking slightly upwards. So then if I jump around to the 3/4 view here, okay, so again, I'm looking at some of those informations. I get a better idea about the height of the head on this one because she's much more kind of level. I don't know if it's because she's smirking or if that's the shape of a mouth, but it looks like, and this is something I'd really only worry about to at the very end. She might have, I think it's because she's smirking. Her mouth looks tilted on this view. Anyway, so yeah, you got the height of the head there. You've got Again, that nice shadow coming in from the right hand side is giving you that nice shape there, which is nice. Getting an idea about that temporal ridge there, which is nice. Here we get a little bit more information about the chin and the jawline. So looking at this, it looks like we've got that. Actually, something that we can do while we're in Photoshop, if you ever want to get images, take them into Photoshop and actually do a draw over it, is make them black and white. So I'm going to do a quick little trick. I'm going to make a new layer, make it black, and then saturate that layer. There we go. And then I can also just use the levels there just to try and push some of those shadows. Just like that. So what I've done there is I've just put a black layer on top of my main reference layer, and then change that layer to saturate or hue. With black, they pretty much do the exact same thing. And then I just up the levels of this just to make some of the shadows a bit darker. I want contrast. Okay. So then, get an idea of what's going on with that jaw. Now here as well, I'm looking at, is it a very straight jaw? Is it a particularly curved jaw? Have I got something where I've got maybe an unusual shape? Some people have got a slight kind of curve inwards on the jaw. These are all things I've got to look at. So here it seems like SekaaH's got quite a nice little jaw there. Not the most pointiest of chins, but you can see there. And then she looks like she's got quite a full cheeks. So even though we do have this lovely sweep going up there, it does look like, if we just look at the profile, that it's a lot flatter there. Now I am noticing as well, we do have, if I go really, really kind of into it, we do have that kind of shape going. It's not a perfectly flat surface, but I'm looking at the basics. What else is it to look at in here, in the 3/4? Okay, so yeah, we've got the cheeks there. You can see that we've not got like really puffy cheeks, or we've not got very sallow cheeks. Just got quite full cheeks there. And then a orbital socket here. This is one of my favourite shapes of the head. So what's going on in this portion here? Well, looks like we've got a nice bit of fat coming in, or tissue coming in from that upper eyelid. So that's going to be this area here. And then what's going on in the eyelid underneath, and the lower eyelid. So here, she's not got very puffy eyelids. Some people have got quite, pronounced eyelids. If you're dealing with someone who's very old, all this information is going to be pulled down, so you probably have a bit more of a shape there. Now here, she's not. Maybe SekaaH is in her 20s or something, or maybe she's just in good shape. But here, we've got pretty much just a straight line down. Very, very little kind of sagging. Good skin. Cool. So that's a bit of information, and I get a good idea about the depth of the eye socket from there as well. What's going on in the forehead? Well, not a whole lot. She's not got a very pronounced frontal lobe there, so that's quite nice for me. And I can make assumptions about the back of the head, following some of the landmarks. Again, it's getting some of these ideas in my head. What's going on now? Her ear we'll look at her in a separate view here. But last two things I'll be looking at here are things like the nose. Or last few things, not last couple of things. Like the nose. So I'm getting an idea about what's the general shape of the nose. So if we're coming in through the eyebrows here, and again, this is getting a little bit blended in here, so I'm kind of making some photographic assumptions. She's got a fairly standard nose, nothing too peculiar about her nose. Not very, very dynamic, not very pronounced. A lot of very, very soft, subtle nose, and a mouth as well. So I can have a look at, I can get an idea about the shape of the lips. Okay, cool. And then if I go to the profile view, now this profile and front view are going to give you a lot of information, probably the most amount of information, whereas a 3/4 view is going to solidify the information from both of these views. Now here what I'm getting is a lot of information. I'm getting a good idea about the shape of the jaw there, so yes, she does have a more subtle curve to her jaw there. Her nose, so we can see where the glabella, what the shape of the glabella is right there, so we can see there that it's not a very deep inset, nose. Okay, so looking at this kind of information, The shape of her nose. Again, I'm looking at this and she's looking slightly downwards. So I've got to look at the other profile view, see if it matches up. Okay, yeah, it pretty much matches up. So get an idea about there. I can also see how it transitions into the... There you go. It transitions, the nose transitions into the lips there. So is it a very very right angle shape like that? Is there a kind of a bit of a curl up and then curve down like that? Now here it's lovely, just a nice subtle sweep into the lips. Get a good idea about that. You know, have I got any idea about the shapes of the cheeks? Okay, so all these things I'm thinking about. From the profile here, now the frontal lobe is an interesting one because it'll look a certain way in profile and it might look a little bit different in 3/4 because of that lovely little space there we keep talking about that I really should either learn the name or give it a name. But here, this is where a lot of that fat's going to be kind of building up. So we actually see that lovely shape. Kind of that little kind of sweep out and then come in. We see that on the side because that's noticeable on the profile. However, when we're looking on the... So it's not noticeable on the 3/4. But when we're looking at it in profile, it's there. And obviously we're not seeing that information. Shape of the chin. So like I'm looking at a lot of like angles. Where are my angles? Underneath the jaw, have we got a very, very... It's got an athletic jaw, a jowl. Have we got a very like fatty, tissuey jowl? Nope, we've got quite a nice sweep here. Again, back of the neck. You see sevens about there. Your clavicle, that's looking good. And then the ear as well. So again, her hair is kind of sitting on top of the side here. So I can get as much as of an idea as I can. So I can see the helix, the antihelix, the tragus, the lobe. Get an idea about what's going on. Look at any other references as well to see, you know, from the side, that's my general shape of my ear. But does it stick out a lot in my front view? So, we can see there, the lobe actually sticks out quite a bit. Okay, good. That's good to know. Is there any other view? Oh, nice. Okay, so in this view, we get a much better idea. Cool. So you can see there, just exploring all these different views. So she's pushed the hair a lot more over that ear. We got a much nicer idea. So her ear is a fairly standard kind of ear shape. There's nothing too kind of crazy about it. But for me, this is something I have to take a bit more time on to kind of really kind of understand what's going on because I hate doing ears and I'm rubbish at them. Well, I'm not rubbish. I'm good at them, but I just hate doing them. And then we can look at minor things like what's going on behind the ear. You've got that little part of the bone there, which is just behind here. What's going on in this kind of cavity area. Cool, so that's all what's going on in my head. So that's been 10 minutes just to sort that out. But this is something I'm continuously doing. And like I said, you don't have to do a draw over, but it's something I'm continuously doing and observing as I'm sculpting. So with all that being said, let's actually go in and do some sculpting. So what I've done is I've got my PureF document here on another screen. So this is bigger than it looks on this screen. But what I've done is I've gone and like I've done in Photoshop, gone and got all the relevant shots of Sekaa and I've put them in like a nice little row here. Notice as well that this is something that it's good to do. I'm not just going to get a lot of random kind of directional heads and stuff and kind of put them around. What I've done is I've got my front shot and then I'm turning to the left and I'm turning to the right. If you're doing something where you're going to be using a lot of references from different angles, try and arrange it in some way. So what I've got my second years last year doing is you've got your heads being turning in both those ways, and you've also got, if you can get them, you know, your subject looking up, your subject looking down, your subject looking down to the left, your subject looking down to the right. There's loads of ways you can lay these out to kind of maximize the work you do. And I've got basically the same thing in skull form, just for reference. But at home, I have got my own personal mini Frank, and I have got my own personal little mini Danny here to work on. So you know, using all the reference that I can. There you go. Okay, so let me minimize Photoshop. There we go. So I'm going to go in and just start doing some sculpting the same way we did it the other day. So I'm going to turn off perspective for this at first, and all I'm going to do is just grab a big old move brush, bring in the sides of the head. Again, looking at Sekaa at the side here, so let's have a look at the eye. Okay, so gonna get that general shape again, remembering that she's looking up, so I've got to kind of compensate. And then there you go. So if I do that, that's cool. There we go. Now what I'm not going to be doing is trying to get a perfect likeness of our subject here for this. I'm just doing, I'm using her as a overall guideline, so I'm using her main features to kind of influence what I'm doing, but I'm not going for an absolute likeness. Not yet, anyway. Okay, so boom. So look from the top, that's looking pretty good. Maybe bring this in a little bit. So again, right away, within the first 30 seconds to a minute of sculpting, what I'm doing is outlining the side of the head, the chin, a lot of features there that are important for us. Push that in a little bit, push that in a little bit. Again, using those tools and the little modifications to like using Alt with a move brush to, instead of moving it camera direction, sorry, I'm just lowering my blind, my sun's in my face. Instead of moving the surface in kind of like a camera direction, if I hold Alt, I'm moving it in the normal direction of the surface. So where all the polygons are facing, they're going to move in that direction. Cool. Awesome. Let's get a neck in there. Oh, I should say as well, I'm starting off with a Dynamesh 32, so again, really low resolution. And that's just because of control. Boom. So I'm looking at the side profile there. I think one thing that me and a lot of sculptors, even like very, very professional ones, are guilty of is we tend to make the neck like super dynamic like that at first when we're first sketching, and everyone's face is kind of jutted forward. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm just making it as accurate to the subject as possible. So again, looking at that general width of the neck, needs to be a bit wider, I think. Again, thinking about those face planes, like we did on my sketches, and seeing where they line up. Yeah, let's get some stuff going on. So I'm getting my clay build up here and just starting to chisel in. Okay. Back to the move brush, because I'm going to see things as I'm working. I'm going to end up seeing things kind of appear. And I'm just sorry the head was a little bit too cylindrical. For cylindrical? Spherical. Right. Look at my reference here. Now, as always, as well, I'm not too worried about getting it perfect at first. What I'm trying to do is just get the overall kind of feel. But what I can do is aim for the general kind of shapes and forms that my subject has. So as we were talking about, Sekaa has that more subtle glabellar area here, and on mine, her frontal lobe's a little bit too far back, bit Neanderthalic, so I'm going to push that forward. And then I'm going to move around. As I pull this forward, one thing I'm going to risk doing is pulling like areas around here a bit too much as well. So I'm just, I think I've got to thin out the head a bit more. Just pull out that chin a little bit. Now, what I'm doing here as well, this whole one thing, one of my main point of focus for me is trying to make this look as feminine as possible, as early on as possible. Because when I sketch, I tend to be very, very loose, and I add a lot of detail, to a lot of noise to the face through like clay buildup and stuff. So, and I tend to start off with very strong features. So my sculpts at first tend to look very masculine, and then I've got to spend a while kind of pushing and pulling forms to make them look a lot more feminine. So one thing I'm doing with this is just trying to be a bit more feminine. And obviously, I will say, I probably said it in class already, we're using the terms masculine and feminine just for structural reasonings, obviously. You can have masculine looking women, feminine looking males, and then obviously everything in between. So we're using some broad generalized terms just in case anyone gets concerned about that. Okay. So let's have a look at how wide that nose is. So she's not got a particularly wide nose. It's very, very curvy, but from the front it's not very big. So I'll get a general term there. That's good. Trying to get what I can again from my side views in these early stages. Now I am seeing that on a reference it looks like around here there's a fair bit of not fat but tissue. So I'll be thinking about that. Looking at how much the muzzle comes forward. This is quite an important one for just general sculpting, is looking how much of that front kind of skeletal structure influences the front of the face. Again, my first little bit of damn standard. I mean, I'm getting to the point now where I'm struggling to add any of that information in that I want. So right, boom, that's all I'm doing for this level. Maybe took a bit longer than I really should have there. Let's go up to above 6. Let's go to 75. There you go. So that gives me a bit more information. From here, I can start using the damn standard. Kind of chisel in some areas to define some areas. Now, yeah, I really need to pull in the structure. Her head is very wide. So now I've got that bit of information, I can pull some of this out. Like that. Now we'll remember as well that she has got from the front her lower lobe here sticks out a lot more than I tend to pull these quite close in, but I've paid attention to my reference. And then what's going to happen from the side? So she's got an ear more like that from the side. I think her ear is more like that. Yeah. Nice. Cool. So then, basic ears in there. That gives me a bit of influence what's going on. That's nice. Is there anything I really need to look at this point? Now that I've got my ears in, is there anything I really need to kind of pay attention to? I think, yeah, looking at that, I'm seeing around, forgot my reference, like here. I just need to kind of pay attention to. So if I zoom in like that, I can have a bit more. Again, this is much bigger because I've got this on my other monitor, so this for me is like quite big. So I'm going to do is pull these in. I'm going to try and strengthen, even though yes, she has got she hasn't got a very dominant jaw. There is still a nice little right angle down here that I'm seeing. Again, thinking she's looking up a bit more, so I'm going to get a bit more of a. So that shape's going to kind of stick out a little bit more, but Now again, we're looking a little bit masculine right here, and I think that's just down to a lot of the shapes that I've got going on. A lot of quite dominant shapes. So hit that with a bit of trim dynamic. So early, a little bit early for the trim dynamic for me, but what I can do is just flatten out some of those shapes. Get that, an idea of that shape in there a bit for myself. Okay. Let's bring in the neck a little bit. Sometimes the difference between you know, very dominant shapes and very subdominant shapes is a few millimeters. You know, you change the width of someone's neck from there to there, and you're changing a lot of information. Maybe there's a lot of cranium. Let's push that in a little bit. One thing I'm doing here as well is I'm sculpting someone who has hair, and I'm sculpting them bald at the minute for the purposes of this. So depending on how thick and full voluminous someone's hair is, you might end up subconsciously adding more than you really want on into your bald, because you sometimes subconsciously sculpt the silhouette, where they might have quite a small head but very big hair. And again, I'm just using my skull as well just to help me get some of these shapes. Okay, so I faffed around with that enough. Let's move on to the nose. So she's not really got any pronounced nasal ridge. You know, it's very beautifully just, it's a nice little beautiful slope there. So again, a lot of this at the beginning, there's just a lot of movement brush, if anything. I can just use a movement brush, move that in. You know, looking at that from the bottom of the nose to the top of the lip, I can also get a good idea about a mouth position. A problem I had for years when I first started off sculpting is I always used to make my mouths, one, really wide. I was still measuring, but for some reason I just kept making my mouth that wide. I also used to sculpt my lips out of my face rather than sculpt them into the face. So all my characters looked like they were pouting for ages, and it used to take me ages to work around that. So what I've found is sculpting lips out of a mass, and you'll hear me call it the peanut. I don't know why I call it the peanut, but I sculpt out the mass of the mouth in general, and then I'll carve in the information, like the lips and stuff. So like there I can carve in a bit of the chin information. Nice. Looking good. Now how deep are her eyes as well. Okay, so she hasn't got particularly deep eyes. So I don't have to worry about tons of overhang or anything like that. Maybe a bit more than that. Nice. Now, because these photographs as well are, pardon me, we have some shadows, but they're not particularly high dynamic shadows. Like these shadows, for instance, are very high dynamic shadows. These are fairly soft. You've got a 2-point lighting, a softbox off to one side, on a white background. So we're getting, obviously we can see the information, but we're not necessarily getting all the really, really beautiful, like minute detail. And also the reference images aren't like super high resolution, so we do lose stuff through general kind of, pixelization. So, but also, like I said, I'm not using her as I'm not trying to make her perfectly. I'm using her as a jumping off point. So for instance, I might want to make my chin a little more pointier. So I can do that. I might want to bring in my neck in a little bit more, so I can do that. Now, I've done something here which I said I wouldn't do, because it's something that will age someone very, very drastically. I sketched in a little bit of that laugh line, because that's something I do when I'm thinking about these sketches, thinking about these characters. I'm thinking about where all the muscles and tissues fall, and one of them is the laugh line, which you can see here, like here and here, but they're not really very dominant. But I've sketched them in there as like a landmarking system, so again, remembering that. So let's just put an age on. Okay, maybe she's 28. Let's say she's 28, and she's lived a pretty good life. You know, she's not gone through mass amounts of hardships, or she's not had to work in some harsh environments. So her skin's going to reflect that. Now, if we were then taking something like this, same age, but then she has lived a really, really hard life. She's worked in a corrosive environment, whatever like that. I've then got to think about, okay, where am I going to... Sorry, I'm noticing my mic keeps clipping every now and then. Where am I going to add detail, and what detail is that going to be to age her? Not make her 60 years old, but make it look like she's a 28-year-old who's just lived a life. Again, as character artists, character sculptors, character designers, these are things we need to think about. Alright. Bit of minor stuff that I keep noticing. Now I'm just going to sort out some of this information at the back. Now looking at this, actually, I've noticed that my neck is really, really far back, so I'm going to just bring that forward a little bit. And then just use the clay build-up just to fill it out a little bit. Betterish. Okay. Make some changes. So I might go quiet for a bit. All I'm doing is just thinking about stuff. Okay. Now I know what I'm doing here as well. I'm making my neck too long. Let me just bring that up. There we go. Okay, I'm happy with this so far. You know, there's... Oh, actually, you know what I need to do before I move on to the next resolution is just chill that detail down there. Maybe just chill out a little bit of that cheek. And then just fill out there a tiny bit. Because I'm getting rid of those laugh lines. I've just got to be a bit more aware about them when I'm doing my next stage. But I'm also adding a little bit of mass just in this area here. Because I'm looking at the profile here, and in my head, I'm kind of like asking for that. I'm screaming out for it. Okay, that's looking pretty good so far. Oh, from the front, I'm just noticing I feel like I want to... Yep, for now that's cool. So I'm going to jump up some resolutions. So let's go to 150 fields. Let's turn on the... Okay, so that's our resolution at the minute. Fairly loose. That's our next one. I think I can go a bit more than that. So let's go 250. Yeah, okay. So that's 250. It's much denser. I think I can get quite a lot of information out of that. So I shouldn't have to move that resolution much after this. So what am I going to do? Sticking with the face. Let's go in there. Tell me on that. Okay, so at 35 minutes. So far I've been about 20 minutes on this, I think. And now is where the fun really starts. So define the jawline a little bit, the philtrum. Now she's got a quite nice, it's not very pronounced, it's also not very not pronounced. She's got quite a nice philtrum. So kind of start getting this information in there. It looks like, again, I'm trying to make assumptions here, but it looks like her muzzle isn't particularly protruding. Again, I'm looking at this profile here, and you can see we've got this internal sweep. There's no kind of like external convex shape. It's more of a concave shape. So let's try and reflect that. Think about what that would do to the areas of the mouth here. Do the same. I think her mouth is a bit low. Yeah. Cool. Again, looking at that 3/4, always referring back to the 3/4 view, as that's going to give you tons of information. Okay. So I think my task in the muzzle here is getting this transition from a concave shape in this area and then a convex shape in this area. That's where that shadow is being produced on our actual reference images, which is going to be fun. I think I can blend out a lot of the information in the nose. Not using the smooth tool as well. I'm trying to rely on my brush control more than using the smooth brush just to smooth it out like that. Okay, let's get some nostrils in there. Working with that low poly stuff as well, you know, when I push the mesh enough, it starts to kind of pixelate and break a bit. I'm working with that. I'm allowing the mesh to do that. Okay. So I'm going to finish off this now. And I've just bumped it up to 500 resolution now, so it's still not super dense in the grand scheme of ZBrush, but it's dense enough that I can just start to finalize some things for a sketch. You would notice as well, I tried to work on the epicanthic fold of the eye a little bit. It's a bit tougher at lower resolutions, and it's a bit tougher when you're not dealing with actual proper topology, proper topology, because when you dynamesh it, you tend to lose a lot of the information. It always looks quite fake. It's quite hard, finicky to deal with. So bumping up to 500 resolution gives me a little bit extra, and I might be able to actually get something that's a bit more believable. But all I'm doing now is I'm just going around fixing up some stuff, finalizing some stuff. Again, this is a sketch, so I'm not particularly bothered about this being perfect. Oh, you would have noticed me as well noticed me going to the brush menu here and change a different smooth brush. So your standard smooth is really good. Obviously, in small doses, you learn how to use a smooth brush properly. It's just another sculpting tool. But sometimes you just need to really smooth some stuff down really fast, and I tend to use the stronger smooth brush for that. And in fact, part of my general tool set, if I have this instead of my normal smooth, and I just set the intensity really low, so I'll use this as a normal smooth for as long as I can, just so I don't have to worry about going into the lightbox and changing all that kind of jazz. But what I'm going to do is just change this back to the normal. Actually, no, I'll do what I did said then. There you go. Bit of inflate here just to finish off the lips a little bit. In fact, before I do that, just going back a second, I'm going to just work on that bottom lip a little bit. So partway through sculpting this, I figured I'd just take this into Premiere Pro and I'd do some sort of put some audio, some music over the top of it, and just do silent, because I went silent for about 20 minutes before. So the music that you heard then was because of that. Now you'll notice as well, I'm always looking from underneath and above at certain bits, like the mouth, the nose, the forehead. It's always a good practice to look underneath to see that I'm actually getting the right shape, that it's not too spiky, not too flat. Again, using that smooth brush at a really low resolution just to get rid of, or low intensity I should say, just get from stuff underneath there. Oh, looks like my face is a little bit asymmetrical. That's cool though. I've just noticed that my face is a tiny bit asymmetrical, but I'm going to leave it. That's fine. Faces are asymmetrical anyway. I must have accidentally knocked off the symmetry. I remember this is a sketch as well, so if you're just doing a general sketch with a closed mouth, you're going to get certain clipping. You see, like the mouth there, it's not perfect in the corners, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to make it look much nicer, and I'm fine with that, because again, it is a sketch. If this was a proper sculpt or something there, I want to have a full kind of range of proper information around the mouth, I'd make a mouth bag. Or when I'm retopologizing this, I'd make sure that I've got topology where I can actually break up zones of the face. Stuff we're going to look at in later weeks, but I can use my topology in Maya to actually help me sculpt. Because one thing we're going to look at fairly early on is where you would take a sketch up to, because this obviously can't, well, I don't know how obvious it is, but you can't take a Dynamesh sculptor. It's rare that you can take a Dynamesh sculpt up to a production level ready thing. This is literally just a way to produce a sculpt. And there are other ways as well. I'm not saying this is the only right way. This is the way I'm showing you, but there are other ways. But what I'm also able to do is retopologize my Dynamesh sculpt once I got up to a point where I'm thinking, right, yeah, this is looking good. And then from there, I retopologize it inside Maya. because that's my tool of choice for retopologizing. And then, so I just got to concentrate at this point. And then I bring it back in, and I would project all the information I've got here onto it, and then I would continue sculpting on a much better surface. All this stuff will become far more clearer as time goes on, because some of it might be thinking, what the hell is he talking about? What does any of that mean? It will become clear. Don't you worry. Now, one thing hopefully as well you've noticed is I've made some quite large adjustments even at this relatively high resolution, because I've got no fear. If I need to make changes, I'll make them now. I'm not going to wait to try and fix them. If I see an issue, I fix it. Yeah, I fix it. Nothing more I can really say to that. Once I see an issue, I fix it. Because what I saw then was my muzzle had turned very, very flat. And now what I'm seeing is my lips are too far down from my mouth. Let's make some adjustments. That's a lot nicer. That's a lot better. That's like my chin. Is my chin too big? Yeah. Yeah, my chin's a bit too big. About a bit of a Jay Leno chin there. Oh, saving. There we go. Now that needs a bit of adjustment there. Now as well, what I'm doing, again in the back of my mind, what I'm always looking to maintain is obviously some of those shapes. Always trying to maintain those shapes, and never going to stop forgetting about them. And like I said at the beginning, I'm not going for realism. Oh, I'm not going for perfect likenesses. I'm just using Saskia as a, or Sekaa, keep calling her Saskia, Sekaa as a jumping off point, because I'm following the general shape of her head, but then I'm making some adjustments myself where I feel like, oh, you know what, I want certain shapes to be in there rather than not be in there. I'm getting close to finish now. So is this a perfect sculpt? No, it's a sketch again. There are things that I'm not particularly happy with, like around the bottom of the lips here. I'll spend a bit more time. There's some artifact kind of shapes that are going on, like where, because I've not got a good topology. One thing that topology does is allows us to have very, very smooth, undulating surfaces. So around the eyes here, you can see I've got these little lines appearing, and that's just because of the topology, like the density, the makeup of the mesh here. Now I can go through and fix those if I wanted to make this look perfect. So here I'm just using the trim dynamic just to kind of flatten off some areas, or I can use something like the pinch brush to pinch. But I'm still going to have a little bit of that low poly kind of artifact in which I can never really get rid of until I'm in like the millions. Because what am I at here? 600,000. Which again, for ZBrush, is nothing. You probably saw in one of the other videos that one of my models is 40 million just for the actual body. That's minus clothing. And that's only because I need that amount of resolution to do what I want to do for that sculpt with all the skin details. Check some of the other materials, see what it looks like. So these other materials are going to pick up different information, like I've said before. So, you know, I've sculpted mainly in the basic material and green metallic, because those are the tunes I often fall back on. I like them. But I could turn something shiny on like this and see what's going on. This often kind of highlights pinches, kind of very, very nasty, uneven surfaces. Now this is more for if I was taking this to render. Well, light's going to really play an important role. Or generally, just some points where I just need to remind myself, don't forget about that. So, for instance, there, I'm going to over-highlight it again. But you've got these laugh lines that, of course, if we had them if we had like very, very dominant information, it looks very awful. But I've kind of underdone it, I think, on this. So just what I'm going to do is I'm going to try a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to make a bit of a selection there. I'm using my masking tool. Just unmask that bit there. Soften it out a little bit. So there, I'm just holding control for mask and tapping the actual mask itself to soften it off. And I'm going to get the inflate brush, quite big, but a low intensity. And then I'm just going to, don't worry about what's going on screen there. Don't worry about that. And I'm just touching it slightly. And that's what I'm trying to get, is a very, very subtle change there. Like that. Much better. And then, I could stay on this for a long time and try and make it as perfect as possible. But the last little thing I'm going to do is just, no, she's not really got one of those, has she? So the standard brush is ZBrush's standard brush, and I don't really use this because it's a little bit too soft for me. As you can see, it's a little bit of a soft brush, but it's nice to just use in some areas. So I like using it for indentations, soft indentations. So for instance here, I'm seeing there's like a nice little transition from where the cheek is to where the nose is, as well as this lovely little transition from where you've got the break in between the lower eyelid and that fat deposit. You've often got like a little bit of a recess there. You'll see that being picked up in the Arcane animations where they got basically those white highlights, which is very kind of like Riot Games thing to do. Whoever does that art often does that. There you go. Just a And one thing you'll see me commonly do, especially when I come to the end of this kind of phase, is I'll go in there with the trim dynamic, add a bit of information, and smooth it back out. So I'm using the smooth tool quite often in this case, because what that's having me do, what's allowing me to do, is create some more believable, realistic, sharper transitions in the skin, like that, for instance, underneath the eye. Before I had something very, very, there wasn't much shape going on there, but just with that little bit of, like that, I can just smush that back. And I'm not pushing it back very far. Again, this is think of the smooth brush as a sculpting brush rather than a fixing brush. It's because all you're essentially doing is pushing the mesh back with your finger. If you were doing this with clay, your thumb in the mesh. I keep saying I'm going to finish, but I will finish in a second. So let's use that standard brush again, just to match what's going on in the reference there. Where you got a little bit of indentation underneath. Now what I'm adding there is the bulge that was created by the lower part of the eyeball pushing against the lower eyelid. Let's do one more pass, try and get this looking okay. you can see what I'm adding there. I'm adding that fold where the eyelid is going behind the eyeball into the cavity of the skull. But because it's such a weird little shape that it's quite hard to actually get in there at a low resolution. I find it hard anyway. Some people might find it very easy. I struggle with it a little bit. I always have done. And you can see there, because of the resolution, it does sometimes look a little bit goofy in low res. Okay, whoops, there we go. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm actually going to leave it there now. So, yes, using Saskia as my jumping off point, I got this done in about an hour. Am I happy with it? It's alright. It's not bad. It's not awesome for me, I will say. Again, without tooting my own horn, it's not awesome for me, but I think doing this and also speaking at the same time often kind of splits the brain, for me anyway. Splits the brain a little bit, and I tend to miss stuff. But you get the idea. So I'm using the exact same things that I was using for the Jonathan Baker sculpt. Taking it a little bit further than I did with him, to create something a bit more kind of polished. Near the end, I was using that smooth brush a lot to smooth back some information, because I wanted to go for that much more younger feminine face. Whereas obviously Jonathan Banks is a craggy old white guy in his 60s. Sekaa is, I don't know. Again, maybe she's in the mid to late 20s. She might be Persian. I'm not sure, but she's got features that are very different to Jonathan Banks. So, yeah. And if I was doing this for a full production, we would be looking at, I'd pass this over to my art director or whoever, and I would get feedback from that, and then I'd move to the next stage, and I'd be looking at refining the features, getting some blocking in some hair, blocking in some features like eyebrows, because one thing we're missing here is the hair, is the eyebrows. We're missing features like the actual pupils and irises. If this was a male character with like a beard, stuff like that, we put in these landmarks. I may even do it in this stage, to be honest. I put some hair in there, like I'll block in this hair, or block in, maybe I'll visit have some hair to just give it a bit more shape. I'd fix the ear, obviously. I'd try and make it as neat as possible at this resolution. Then I'd go and topologize it in Maya, give it a better structure, and then bring it back in, do all what I need to do next, and then I would work from there. And then that's where, if I go back to the next project, so let me just, it's on a quick save, so we're okay, we're not losing too much. That's where, yes, I will actually save it, they're quick. Bang, there we go. This model has all this information. So this Laura Bailey sculpt started off as a Dynamesh sculpt, just like that. It was a bit goofy as well. Like, I thought I was doing the right job looking at the reference, and it took me stepping away from a day, sending it to some friends, them making comments, and then came back and was like, oh, actually, you know what? I need to change a lot of stuff. But that's where, once I've done my Dynamesh sculpt, I've got something which is very workable. I retopologize it, which means my mesh would look, coming in, would look something like this. So what I've done inside Maya is I've remade the topology of the surface, so I've done the right edge flows, and you're going to be learning about all this, don't worry. I've done all the right edge flows, I've worked out the information I need. So where do I need most information? Eyes, nose, mouth, that kind of area. Where can I make some interesting little diversions, all that kind of jazz. And then I've come in projecting it. Now what this does is it gives me a much better surface. I mean, a Dynamesh surface is fine, but it's got the same density over the entire surface. So areas like the top of the head or the shoulders, which don't need that much information, they're the exact same density as areas that do need information, like the eyes and the mouth and the nose and the ears and stuff. So what I've done here is basically redistribute the edges in a much more kind of economic way. So areas like the mouth and the ears and nose have got far more topology than everything else. And that way I can sculpt in more information, and also the topology flows with the surfaces. So any kind of like nice curves and stuff are maintained very nicely with this topology. And also what this does, because I've got a nice optimized surface, as I start adding information, what I'm able to do is sculpt in more and more information to the point where, if I go up to 7, and where am I up to here? 17 million. At 17 million, I'm able to add skin detail. Like pores like this. And if I was to subdivide this one more, now up to 70 million, which is quadruple what I just had. So then I would be able to sculpt even more deeper information on there, which is cool. Which is what this is the point where I take my longest amount of time. Like it took me maybe 3 times, 4 times as long to do this information than it did to actually get like the base sketch in there. But even without all that information all the skin information, you can see the attention to detail that I've had to put in. Let's turn it down a little bit so the wrinkles don't make as much of a impact. There you go. So you can see the attention to detail for the subject. Now I've not got my Laura Bailey pure ref anywhere. I'm not really going to go out and search for the right images. But if anyone's familiar with her, you'll be able to see that really paying attention to the features of her face. She's got quite big cheeks. She's got these kind of squirrely lower cheek area here. She's got this quite pronounced region of the face here. It looks very kind of like Frankenstein-y without the eyebrows here, but she's got quite hooded sockets at the top here. So there you go, like a hooded sockets here. She's got quite round ears that kind of stick out more in the middle here. These are the things that I'm really, really paying attention to when I'm doing sculpts of a person. And then I had this in for a while to kind of make sure that it looks okay. The hair is terrible. It was a really, really rushed job. And like I said in one of the previous videos, the neck's far too long on this. But what I'm more kind of focused on is the face. And again, this is exactly what we can do. It's just time and practice, and observing our subjects and practice. I mean, I said about 5 million different times. I'll practice, and really just paying attention to stuff and not worrying about the really small detail stuff. I mean, if I go down to 2, so here I've got I got 70 million. Sorry, not 70 million. I got 70,000 active polygons right now. So you can see there, you can clearly see the topology here. So let's call this the same density as a Dynamesh kind of resolution. The squares, the polygons are the same size. Look what information you can actually get out of that. What information can we actually have in there? We can get quite a lot of really, really nice information. It's just paying attention to that information and being aware of it, and always looking and checking, and then getting feedback. One of the things we're really going to do a lot is get feedback on our sculpts. And I'll say it again, your sculpts are going to look pretty bad at first, and that's awesome. That's what we want. Because then when we share our feedback, we can observe other people's. We can see if people are making the same mistakes. We can help each other. Maybe someone has a technique of doing something that you're like, oh my god, that's the best thing in the world. Because from there, this is the hardest part, I would say, for me anyway. No, sorry. This is the easiest part for me, but it can also be the hardest part for a lot of people, is getting the structuring. But once you've got this, a lot of that is easy but time consuming, because all you're doing then is just making sure that your sketch is believable. And the information on there, not even your sketch, like your head, your sculpt, is believable, and the pores look believable. The wrinkles look believable. Do they have, like, for instance, Sekaaah here has maybe lupus or some sort of skin issue on a cheek here. She's got some spots. It looks like she's got a bit of maybe eczema or something. She's got a little bit of something on her forehead here. They're making sure that these are present and look believable and not just slapdash information. But the exact same way I've just made that head, then I made this the exact same way. I just obviously had that one additional step where I retopologized. But, you know, it all starts somewhere. So if you go back to that head now. All right, that's an older one, so let's actually open up the proper one. There you go. There you go. Yeah, so, you know, this is the stage where I would retopologize my head. Because then after this, I'm getting the wrinkles, I'm getting proper information. I mean, yeah, there's tons of reasons why we'd retopologize, and I'm not going to go into this video, to be honest, because it's a long process, and there's many different reasons why. But yeah, so longest video once again, hour and a half, but exact same process as we did for the Jonathan Banks. All I've done there is look at the reference. Again, I've broken down that information in Photoshop ahead of time, you know. And again, this is sort of stuff I'll be looking at in my own head when I'm looking at it, when I'm sculpting from reference, and just make sure that it translates over to this. So yeah, well done.